You have earned a master's degree in global governance. Can you explain your position on global governance?
Be afraid. Be very, very afraid. Anytime anybody says they like global governance, really it should send up an immediate red flag. Essentially global governance, if you're not familiar, is a theoretical construct within international relations theory that suggests that, ideally, that in addition to looking at state-based actors, which, getting into some technical language a little bit, international order is presently viewed in the context of the Westphalian nation-state. So they're saying that instead of just looking at these states, these individual units interacting with one another, they're also going to look at additional variables, some being multinational corporations, which exert significant influence on international order and power structures within the world as a whole. Others, civil society organizations and third sector, so nonprofits and things like that. International organizations like the UN, supranational organizations like the EU or the East African Community, and so on and so forth. Now, when you actually look at it a little bit closer, though, the people who are advocating this stuff, in my humble opinion, are really just trying to use this as advocacy for a movement away from the Westphalian nation-state system, which we have now, where each of these states are sovereign. They have control over their own territory. One of the reasons that the U.S. was pushing for this so strongly, especially following World War II, when we were able to really exert influence on the international community quite a bit, was that this was used. We moved towards this system, and really put a lot of pressure on Britain because it, essentially of colonialism and our desire to do away with that, to have liberty within the international system, so that there wasn't one single unit saying we're going to exert our power over you in a legal colonial style fashion. Now, it's also been used, I think, and this is the ultimate point. I'll wrap it up, I promise. This is really just an intermediary to a system of global government, I believe. And that is what I'm most afraid of. They get rid of the social norms within the international order that have meant that all these groups have been unique. They say, oh, no, you can't be working for your self-interest. That's a bad thing. We need to be collective. Oh, actually, a great example is what's just taken place in the European Union. Now, who would have thought 15, 20 years ago that Britain would not have the right to control its own laws? Already, 70% of the laws coming out of the United Kingdom are not made within the United Kingdom. Now, on top of it, with the passing of the Lisbon Treaty, which I believe it's going to, I would have to check to see if the President of the Czech Republic has signed the document yet. It's been a couple weeks since I've checked it. But as soon as the Lisbon Treaty goes through, these countries will not have the right to veto legislation affecting them, which means that they do not control their own country. That's unfathomable to me. Now, how did they push it through? Were they going to ask the people? No, of course not. Now, the EU, the previous treaties that constituted the EU said that if there's any issue with the development of a constitution for the EU, that there would need to be a referendum in each country. Now, how did they get around it? They didn't call it a constitution. They just said, and I've seen the emails, they've been made public and linked, but the people that created this said the way that we're going to get around it is by keeping the exact legal documents intact. We're just going to get our PR guys to make some adjustments, tweak here, tweak there. It'll be the same document. It'll be passed. We don't have to hold referendums. And now it's looking like that's the direction that they're going to head. And I see that as being a model for the world as a whole. We see regional integration in countries all over the place. The EU is trying to use their model of regional integration in other areas as well. I mentioned it just a couple minutes ago. The East African Community is one area where they're working heavily. They're also developing efforts to do this in, I think it's West Central Africa, and Latin America has also been talking about it. I don't see it popping up in Asia for quite a long time because it's a very different region over there. But this was unthinkable 50 years ago, and sure enough, we're on that path now. Now, does that mean that the United States will, cease to exist as a sovereign state in 30, 40 years? No, I don't see that happening. But down the road, not too much further, I would have to withhold my perspective on that, because I honestly, while I hope it doesn't happen, having seen what's taken place in other countries, which I would have said, no, that can never happen, take place, I'm wondering. And it's a source of great anxiety for me. I've lost a lot of sleep over it, thinking about it. But, sorry, I went on way too long. I apologize.
That's okay. That was interesting. And I'm not sure that where we are. I lost Linda. I'm going off here.
That's fine. Now, this is just to ask you to please explain one of the vetting questions that you didn't answer,
Sure.
just so that we can understand where you were coming from. Do you agree that the overall federal budget must be a fixed pie that has a preset spending limit in place, and that those spending limits should be established by a set formula which Congress must adhere to each year?
I remember thinking about that long and hard, and really struggling to find a clear answer on that. There are things I like about the fixed pie approach, which is that it provides, I've been talking a lot about checks and balances and our need for them. It provides a check and balance. It makes sure that that government isn't able to go way far beyond their means as they're doing now, and it would be great for the circumstance that we're presently in. What I'm concerned about, though, and I do have a few reservations about it, is that, any time that, complex formulas are brought into the equation, and these are determined by, some very intelligent people behind the scenes that know what's good for us, I get a little bit concerned. That's the first thing that, happens in my mind. But also, after I start thinking about it, I start thinking, well, maybe I'm just, young, naive, and hopeful. But I would think that, if down the road, if we get some new, fresh, good people in there, that if we can discover water on Mars, we can come below, our budget targets in Congress. Now, it might be too much to ask for, but I think it is possible with fresh blood in there. But when you create a unit, a pool of cash to take from, and you say you can't have any more, it also means that people aren't going to take any less. They're going to use up all that. They're going to use up every bit of that pie. And as a consequence, I think it limits our ability to have a better than hoped-for budget.
Okay, one other of the vetting questions that we were going to go over, it was a yes or no answer, and it was a no at your point, but I might read it once and then read it again because it's a little lengthy. Do you agree that if the previous year budget resulted in a surplus, then the actual surplus dollars from the previous year can only be applied first to the national debt, or if and when the national debt has been retired, the surplus can then only be set aside for future unfunded liability?
To answer that, and I recall thinking that the word that caused my concern is only. Comfortable saying that it can only be used for that. I think that that's certainly one thing that we could do with it. But one of the things that I would think would be appropriate, and I'm going to give President Bush his credit where it's due. He pushed back the surplus that we had in stimulative tax cuts, during a period of significant recession for the United States. Those tax cuts, I thought, were well-timed. They were appropriate. Now, as it turns out, he went spending massively, which sent us into deficit, which is the other side. And we can't have, just one there. We need to have both, restraint on spending and also ensure that people aren't overly burdened with tax. But I don't want to create so many restrictions that if situations are different than, the intent of the Congress was when they passed that legislation,